Okay. So, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, before starting, I would like to inform you that this meeting will be recorded and hope that there are no objections. I'm delighted to welcome you. I'm delighted to welcome very particularly Maryam Rajavi, both remote and in person, to discuss about the situation of human rights in Iran. As you are all aware, this week we celebrate the International Day of Commemoration and Dignity of the Victims of Crime of Genocide and Prevention of this crime, the 9th of December, next Thursday, and the day after the International Human Rights Day. 9th December 2021 marks the day the United Nations General Assembly adopted in 1948 the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. The Genocide Convention provides the first international legal definition of genocide and establishes a duty for state parties to prevent and punish the crime of genocide. I do not need to remind dear colleagues why this commemoration is so important when it comes to Iran. In the summer of 1988, the Iranian regime summarily and extrajudicially executed at least 30,000 political prisoners held in jails across Iran. It was an act committed with the intent to destroy the political opposition, the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran. It begs belief that 33 years since the genocide took place, a proper investigation has still not been conducted or held anyone accountable, and those responsible for the massacre are now in power. The lack of political will to conduct an independent and transparent investigation into these crimes perpetuates impunity and aggravates the violations, and what is worse, it leaves open the possibility for history to repeat itself. On the 10th of December, we commemorate the day of the United Nations General Assembly adopted in 1948 the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which proclaims the inalienable rights that everyone is entitled to as a human being, regardless of race, color, religion, sex, language, political opinion, national, social origin, property, birth of other status. This is the core of the European culture, and we believe that all rules, as far as they are moral, must be applied unconditionally to each individual, and that there are certain claims which every human being is entitled to make, since every single person should be considered as an end in itself and not as a means. This is the central point of the entire doctrine of human rights. The human rights concept includes three characteristics, among others. First, these rights are valid because of the inherent dignity of a human being, and they are part of the natural order rather than being established by a positive law. Second, this natural order is valid wherever human beings live together and interact with one another. And third, these rights, however specified, are rights conferred to all individuals and only to individuals, not to social groups, races, classes, professions, nations, or other states. Human rights do not belong to any cultural tradition. They are not Christian or Islamic or Jewish. They belong to the humankind. Totalitarian regimes like Iran are antagonistic to this concept of humanity and human rights. The Iranian government shares with all totalitarian regimes a common ground that consists of the denial of being human as a universal category applicable to each individual human being, confirmed by the inviolability and uniqueness of the person. These all regimes are anti-human. Today, 7th of December 2021, the regime of the Islamic Republic of Iran characterizes itself by the most flagrant violations of human rights. Arbitrary detention of human rights defenders, lawyers, journalists, dual foreign nationals, secret executions, and forced disappearances, arbitrary sentences, use of torture and ill treatment of prisoners, gender-based discrimination persisting in law and social attitudes, which includes stoning sentences to women, imprisonment, harassment, and arbitrary arrests of all the minorities, sexual and religious. A regime that attempts to silence public dissent over the social, economic, and political situation in Iran and uses excessive and lethal force against the nationwide protests. A regime does not grant Javaid Rehman, the special rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Islamic Republic of Iran, and other human rights observers entry into the country. This is why this meeting is important. We are gathered here today to call on the European Union and its member states to adopt a firm policy on Iran. It is necessary to translate words into action. To recognize the 1988 massacre as a genocide and a crime against humanity. In addition, to urge the international community to call for accountability. The perpetrators of these crimes must be brought to justice. Dear colleagues, the authoritarian regime of Iran is not only a disgrace for the citizens, it is also a real threat for the democratic countries. Recent studies carried out by the European Parliament confirm the misuse of media platforms and other communication channels perpetrated by Iran and another dictatorship to influence the public opinion through democratic processes, focusing on disinformation in particular. Since the formation of the Islamic Republic in 1979, Iran's foreign policy of exporting the revolution has guided the country's international media and outreach operations. These measures continue to evolve with advancements in media and communication technologies, making Iran one of the most prolific threats across the Middle East. The Iranian regime will seek, and it is actually doing so, new opportunities in hybrid strategies to destabilize, divide, and perpetuate itself. At this crucial moment, when the world's attention is focused on the ongoing nuclear proliferation and violation of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, some has to raise the voice and denounce the systemic human rights abuses, the destabilizing strategies integration, and also that the Iranian regime is hosting Al-Qaeda leaders. Dear friends, today we will share ideas, plans of actions, and purposes to fight against one of the worst tyrannies in the world. We need an international mobilization comparable in size to that of the challenge itself. We know this mobilization exists. The courageous fight of Maryam Rajavi and the National Council of Resistance of Iran inspires us. Recently, in the 2021 Free Iran Summit in Washington, relevant voices demand the prosecution for crimes against humanity. However, we must state that all that is not enough. We must do better to prevent such intolerable crimes. We must do better to protect and assist victims. We must do better to prosecuting those involved in crimes against humanity. The European Parliament must be a relevant actor in this context. The time has now come to take forward work on the strategy and translate words into actions. We require bold leadership like the one provided by Maryam Rajavi to take appropriate decisions. I'm sure this event will strengthen our commitment and determination. I'm particularly grateful for the participation of Maryam Rajavi, courageous leader of the National Council of Resistance of Iran. Madam Rajavi, I want to thank you on behalf of all for the outstanding work you're doing to promote a secular, free, democratic Iranian republic at a very high personal cost. While so many Iranians, both secular and religious, have grown desperate for a change, the regime persists opening the doors to meaningful reforms and becomes even more militant and totalitarian, relying on violence and new surveillance and control mechanisms to oppress its citizens, silence the civil society, and terrorize its opponent at home and abroad. This is no one who's in a better position. There is no one in a better position than Madam Rajavi to assess the situation of the human rights in Iran a situation that gets worse every day. Madam Rajavi, one more, welcome to this meeting. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President Zarzalekos, for your strong support. Distinguished MEPs, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for me to once again have the opportunity to talk to you, the representatives of the people of Europe, about the situation of human rights in Iran and the Iranian people's resistance for freedom against a brutal dictatorship. On the eve of the International Human Rights Day, the people of Iran rose up in the historical city of Isfahan to demand their stolen rights. In this struggle, the people of Iran make sacrifices and endure much suffering to give life to the words written in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is what is going on in Isfahan and Shahrikord and what happened in July in the cities of Khuzestan and dozens of other cities across Iran. When the ruling mullahs respond with bullets to the people's demand for water, my compatriots take the last resort in rising up against oppression and injustice as stated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is why I have attended the House of Democracy in Europe to urge you, the representatives of the people of Europe, to support the Iranian protesters in the face of streets, in the face of arrests, torture, and slaughter in the streets. More than 1,500 youths and teenagers were murdered in the November 2019 uprising on the orders of Khamenei and his current president, Ibrahim Raisi. More than 40 young Baluchis were killed by Revolutionary Guards in March. At least 14 young Arabs in Khuzestan were shot to death for protesting the lack of water. Yes, all of them write the history of human rights. Dear friends, the massacre of 30,000 political prisoners in 1988 is the worst among the mullahs' countless crimes. And this crime is still ongoing. The carnage was carried out based on 2 decrees by Khomeini to massacre all the prisoners who supported the People's Mujahideen of Iran. It was an obvious genocide, which was followed by the execution of prisoners of other political groups. One of the perpetrators of the 1988 massacre has been on trial in the court of Stockholm in recent months. The court held some of its sessions at the court of Durrës in Albania to hear the testimonies of several PMOI members at Ashraf Tree who are plaintiffs in the case. The henchman who is now on trial confessed to this essential reality. Anyone who speaks of the Mujahideen would be arrested. And the judiciary is extremely serious about this. For several decades now, under the mullah's rule in Iran, it has been seriously forbidden to mention the Mujahideen's name. The ban is an aspect of the policy of genocide carried out against the Mujahideen. Last June, Khamenei selected one of the top executioners involved in the 1988 massacre as the regime's president. In contrast to the clerical regime, the people of Iran launched their call for justice movement that seeks Khamenei and Raisi's prosecution for genocide and crimes against humanity. Dear friends, as far as the international community is concerned, silence and inaction towards this terrible crime is a sign of the policy of appeasement of Iran's ruling criminals. In September 2020, seven UN Special Rapporteur underlined an important moment of the history of this shameless policy. They recalled that despite the UN General Assembly's adoption of a resolution on this massacre in December 1988, the General Assembly and the Human Rights Commission did not take any measures. Such inaction emboldened the Iranian regime and led to the worsening of the human rights situation in Iran. The governments of Europe remained silent and turned a blind eye on the slaughter of political prisoners and the crackdown on people's protests. Therefore, giving an open hand to the regime, they thought the human rights abuses would be limited to within the Iranian borders. The experience of the past 3 decades has proven that this is a mistaken view and a wrong policy. The mullahs considered this policy as a sign of weakness of the West. They found out that their path was open to bomb making and to aggression on the stability and national sovereignty of countries in the Middle East. Last year, the court of Belgium convicted one of the regime's terrorist diplomats to 20 years in prison for a bombing attempt with the aim of murder. Why didn't Europe take any serious action against such state-sponsored terrorism? Why don't they end the impunity of Iran's ruling criminals? Recently, the highest court in Switzerland ordered investigations into the Iranian regime's 1990 assassination of Professor Maryam Rajavi, the NCRI representative in Switzerland, as a case of genocide and crime against humanity. I expect the MEPs to defend Europe's dignity in the face of the policy of appeasement by standing for the human rights of the people of Iran. I urge you to take the lead and initiate a movement to place Europe beside the people of Iran, beside the families and survivors of the 30,000 political prisoners who were massacred in 1988, beside the protesting women and youth, and beside the people and innocent children of Isfahan, whose eyes were wounded and blinded by the IRGC's pellet guns. I urge you to adopt a resolution in the European Parliament which would recognize the 1988 massacre as a genocide and a crime against humanity. I urge you to support the Iranian people's demand for the international prosecution of Khamenei and Raisi for the massacre of political prisoners and the November 2019 killings. And I urge you to call on governments to Europe to condition their relations and negotiations with the clerical regime on its bringing to halt the arrest of protesters as well as torture and executions in prisons. In closing, allow me to repeat, the people of Iran are determined to overthrow this religious dictatorship. They want to establish a republic based on democratic values where people are the only decision makers. In the free Iran, after the mullahs, the National Council of Resistance of Iran is committed to holding free elections and respecting the rights of all people. We are committed to gender equality. We reject the death penalty and the mullahs' Sharia law, and we advocate a non-nuclear Iran. I thank you all.
Thank you, Rajavi, for your strong reminder that justice is pointing at the same time to the initiative for number of those that might open the way to impunity. And now I would like to invite to take the floor to my dear colleague Milan, MEP from Slovenia and co-chair of our group. So, Milan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear Maryam Rajavi, dear colleagues, I wish you a warm welcome, and I'm happy that we have gathered today to discuss the deteriorating situation in Iran. Iran is facing a series of major crises. It remains to be one of the worst active and persistent abusers of human rights in the world today. Iran's regime is pushing the country closer to social and economic collapse by the day. Iran's economy is sinking, its regime is corrupted and divorced from the younger generation. Its corrupt government fails to even bring water to the large parts of the country. In 1988, Iran set up a death commission that ordered the mass murder of 5,000 political activists. This death commission was made up of 4 people that until this day have not been convicted for their actions. Ibrahim Raisi, Iran's current president, was one of them. Iran's nuclear weapon program is a critical point. Over the past few years, Iran has made a major leap forward in its nuclear research and development, in its production capacity, and in its enrichment. All red lines have been crossed. Iran is violating the nuclear agreement and continues with human rights violations, and it's getting away with it. Every day we have devastating news of the suffering of Iranian people, and they deserve our attention and support. Experience tells us that what starts in the Middle East doesn't stop there. The Middle East is incredibly close to Europe. It's a part of our region, and the security situation in the Middle East is closely connected to our own security. I urge the world powers to take hard line against Iran in Vienna nuclear talks, to step up sanctions against Iran, and to start talking seriously the threat Iranian regime is posing for the global peace and security. In Friends of Free Iran Group, we have continuously worked hard to bring the Iranian issue to the attention of the EU institutions. Our last statement to the EU Council and United Nations Security Council is supported by 100 members of the European Parliament, and therefore present a strong call to the world leaders to address the serious and systematic human rights violations in Iran, and do everything in their power to arrange that the perpetrators of these crimes are brought to justice. Ladies and gentlemen, I will stop here so we can open the debate. Thank you.
Dear Mr. Zever, I thank you and your colleagues in the Friends of a Free Iran Committee. Your efforts are very effective in waking up Europe to reject the policy of appeasement and stand by the people of Iran for their human rights. I wish you health and success in the coming year. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I think we are going to watch a video which is relevant to a discussion.
May I sit here?
The barbed wires awaiting their loved ones who were hanged. On August 10, 2021, a court in Sweden began to investigate crimes committed by an Iranian prison official during the 1988 massacre of 30,000 political prisoners. This court would only prosecute Hamid Nouri, one of the perpetrators of the 1988 massacre, in only one out of tens of prisons where the massacre took place. The judge transferred the trial location from Sweden to Albania from November 10 to 18 to hear the testimonies of several witnesses he considered to have decisive testimonies. Those witnesses are the members of the Mujahedin-e-Halk, MEK, in Ashraf III, Albania. They had witnessed the 1988 massacre, went to the death corridor, and even saw the mass hanging of the MEK members. Let's go 33 years back in time, when Khomeini issued a fatwa, ordering the massacre of thousands of political prisoners. According to his fatwa, political prisoners that insisted on their political positions and supported the MEK would be executed. Montazeri, then Khomeini's heir, opposed this fatwa. In a conversation with the perpetrators of the massacre, Montazeri said that their names would be remembered as the biggest criminals in history. Why were these political prisoners executed? Their crime?
Yearning for freedom.
Sentence?
Execution.
When?
As soon as possible.
How do the courts proceed?
A four-member committee appointed by Khomeini was making decisions.
How long does the trial last?
Less than 5 minutes.
What would result in a death sentence?
Persisting on freedom and supporting the MEK.
Execution time?
Immediately after the trial and enduring torture.
Burial place?
Burial place? Unknown. Mass graves.
Witnesses to the massacre recounted aspects of the crimes committed only in Gohar Tasht prison and became the voices of martyrs and spoke with the press. But the testimonies of many other witnesses of the 1988 massacre in other prisons throughout Iran remain unspoken, as few witnesses to the massacre survive to recount the crimes committed. The international community must open its eyes to the greatest crime since World War II and say no to impunity and yes to accountability. The European Union must listen to the call for justice, recognize the 1988 massacre as a crime against humanity and genocide, and stand with the Iranian people to bring the perpetrators of this massacre to justice.
Okay, after we've seen this impressive piece of video, I would Marco Campomenosi, who has to leave earlier.
Yes, but I don't have to leave a meeting as communicated before, so I can stay until the end. So if
the floor is yours.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's not my usual behavior to ask to speak before the others, especially colleagues from bigger groups than mine. But I'd like to bring you my witness. Of course, we are here to speak about the massacre of 1988, and also it's the day of the human rights. No? But I've been also a member of a delegation of the European Parliament who was the electoral mission to the elections in Iraq, in Baghdad. And I could give you the experience of the fact that what Iran is doing against its citizens inside Iran has also an important influence on what they are doing in all the area around, and also in Iraq, also pushing political movements and militias in Iraq in order, for example, not to accept elections results as the ones that we could testify as technically correct, and so on. So I've seen with my eyes members of militias founded by important sums of money from Iran speaking to the press as political leaders in Iraq. So the efforts that the West, but not only West, the rest of the world is doing in order to create a balanced and equal situation in countries nearby Iran is also under attack by the influence of this country. So, of course, here today we have to remember the human rights inside Iran, the fact that they are not respected. All of us know very well how many cases we are dealing about. But I think it's important that I bring you the experience of what I've seen in Baghdad, which is also very, very problematic, and about which I think we could discuss in future more deeply. Thank you very much for the initiative.
Thank you.
Thank you, dear Mr. Kampomenozzi. I thank you very much. You mentioned very important points. This regime is a threat to peace and security for the world, and it resorts to terrorism beyond its borders. A regime diplomat terrorist was sentenced to 20 years in prison in Belgium for plotting a bomb attack on a NCRI gathering in Paris. And Europe must take a firm position and close regime's embassies and expel Mullah's agents. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, let me give the floor to Juan Fernando López Aguilar, who is the chair of the Libe Committee, MEP from Spain, and someone who has also other duties to take care of after this meeting. Juan Fernando, thanks for coming. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Javier. And again, my greetings. I think one of the bottom lines, one of the common features among the ranks and lines of the political pluralism, which is directly represented in the European Parliament as the only directly democratically elected institution in the European architecture, is precisely the rejection of the death penalty. We have made Europe a beacon of a landmark territory across the world free of death penalty. But the commitment is not fulfilled until we do not fight death penalty with our endeavor and with our energy across the world, particularly in those countries in which death penalty is appalling in its execution rate, which is the case of Iran. That is why I understand that the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, which is a most worldwide respected figure, issued the report on the serious human rights violation occurring in Iran, expressing his concern over the impunity from past violations such as the 1998 massacre, which is the point here. So I would like to simply, as chair of the Committee of Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs, which deals with fundamental rights enshrined in the Charter, first commend that the European Union express strong policy, a firm policy, calling Iran to respect human rights, starting with the right to life and the abolition of death penalty as a precondition for the improvement of relationships with Iran, and to recognize 1998 massacre as a genocide, a crime against humanity. That is the point I wanted to share with you. I'm apologizing for having to leave early because these gatherings and cohesions were one of the main duties as chair of the Libe Committee, which is precisely the citizens group. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan Fernando.
Dear Mr. Aguilar, thank you for your important remarks. Your support for the Iranian resistance in this crucial period is very important for the cause of human rights in Iran. Thank you again and wish you health and success in the coming year.
Thank you. And now I'd like Madam Fotyga, MEP from Poland, to take the floor.
It's really a pleasure to participate in this meeting, listening to you. Well, I think we for quite a long time already within European Parliament we were able to lead EU institutions in firm perception of the situation in Islamic Republic of Iran. Luckily, we've been timely enough to condemn crimes in contemporary time. But when I look into recent developments, in particular coming to power of Ebrahim Raisi, one of perpetrators of Massacre of 1988 that by many, including ourselves, is considered to be the example of genocide, crime against humanity. We frequently think about families, mothers, wives of those perishing at that time, and it in later time, including November 2019 killings as well, looking into the highest representation of their country. You are right when you speak about policies of appeasement. We try to expose it. We still remember reports of the European Parliament after signing of JCPOA, or immediately after signing of JCPOA, that were, I would say, lacking enough consequence and determination. I think that now, step by step, we are able to assist Iranian people wishing their own sovereign, independent, democratic state in their efforts. We wish you naturally all the best. I think that recent court proceedings in Sweden, including Ashram 3 prisoners, former prisoners or former witnesses who were able to testify, give hope for a major breakthrough. Also proceedings before UN in a variety of formats of UN. We still remember the meeting in Paris, and we would like still to condemn the so-called diplomacy of the Islamic State, perpetrating acts or plotting to perpetrate acts of terrorism, state-sponsored terrorism. We have to remember that within UN, the portfolio dedicated to combating terrorism lacks this kind of remit to overview and to scrutinize activities of autocratic regimes that sponsor or even commit acts of terrorism. And to those who wish to engage with this kind of regime, I would like to remind that eventually every 80% of business activity of Iran is still under control of Revolutionary Guard. They are arm of Mullah's regime that was directly responsible for killings, including murders, mass murders of their own compatriots. And that we have not only to condemn, we have to ensure that no impunity is to be continued, including the highest ranking posts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Madam Fatiga. I'm very happy to see you again. For years, we have witnessed your activities and support for the Iranian resistance because of your commitment to human values. I'm sure that we can continue together for the cause of the Iranian people's rights for freedom and democracy. I wish you health and success in the coming year and hope to see you again.
All the best.
Toia, MEP from Italy and Vice Chair in Committee of Industry, Research and Energy. Madam Toia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And I will speak my language, in French. It's better. Thank you. Je voudrais saluer d'abord Madame Rajavi, qui est toujours la bienvenue parmi nous et dans le Parlement européen. Et c'est vraiment agréable de la voir. Je ne la vois pas dans ce moment-là, mais je l'ai vue tout à fait tout à l'heure. Et c'est vraiment agréable de la revoir aussi by a video way. Nous connaissons Madame Rajavi comme la leader du mouvement d'opposition démocratique iranienne. Elle est en fait le visage du mouvement totalement l'opposé des mullahs au pouvoir maintenant, et elle représente, à mon avis, l'espoir peut-être et l'engagement aussi d'un Iran libre, de l'Iran libre de demain. Un Iran libre est ce en quoi nous croyons en tant que députés européens. C'est pour ça que nous soutenons cette bataille. Et nous sommes députés de différents groupes politiques et de différents pays de l'Europe. Et ça, pour moi, est une valeur qui va jouer à notre engagement. Et au fil des années, Madame Rajavi a été la pionnière de la lutte pour le changement démocratique en Iran. Elle a représenté un plan en 10 points, je me souviens, pour un Iran libre et non nucléaire, où la peine de mort est abolie, ainsi qu'un plan en 10 points pour les droits et libertés des femmes qui appelle à la participation des femmes à la direction politique du futur de l'Iran. Nous avons toujours soutenu ce plan dans le Parlement européen et nous continuerons à vous soutenir dans cette lutte pour la liberté et la démocratie en Iran. Tant que la moitié de la population est privée des libertés fondamentales, il n'y a de liberté pour personne. Par conséquent, nous voulons défendre les droits des Iraniennes, en particulier des femmes, je veux le souligner, en particulier des femmes courageuses qui ont payé un lourd tribut dans ces dernières 40 années. La jeune génération et surtout les jeunes femmes en Iran regardent les sacrifices faits par ceux qui sont tombés pour la liberté. Et regarde aussi l'exemple et la réalisation des femmes d'Ashraf III et de la résistance iranienne que leur donne l'espoir d'un avenir meilleur sans tyrannie du fondamentalisme, qui est dangereux pour tout, mais je pense surtout pour les femmes. Il y a 2 ans, le régime iranien a massacré plus de 1500 manifestants, dont 400 femmes, si je me souviens bien. Nous avons vu la même force utilisée contre les manifestantes tout récemment à Isfahan, à l'heure que le régime tirait une fois de plus sur les manifestants pour le seul crime de réclamer leur droit à l'eau. Malheureusement, depuis l'arrivée du nouveau président en Iran, la situation des droits de l'homme est considérablement détériorée et de nombreuses exécutions ont été lieu, aussi des disparitions pendant la détention des prisonniers. C'est pour ça que je pense qu'on doit réfléchir beaucoup sur ce qu'a dit Madame Agnès Galmard, la secrétaire générale de Amnesty International le 19 juin de 2021, de cette année. Moi aussi, j'ai réfléchi beaucoup sur ces mots de Madame Galmard, et je pense franchement qu'on devrait mener une véritable et profonde investigation dans les responsabilités à tout niveau. Les responsabilités dans la répression des manifestants, les disparitions forcées et tout ça. Et quand je dis à tout niveau, j'entends à tout niveau, à partir de plus haut, pour toutes les différentes responsabilités.
But we could also say that no countries could be excluded. In the European Parliament, we are working together for human rights, as you know. So that's also our attachment for your country. This is the priority that the European Parliament is promoting in relations with Iran. We want also to use the Magnitsky Law for human rights, which has been brought on the table, which means that the responsibles for violation of human rights should be brought to account. And I thank you so much for your...
La lutte des femmes iraniennes. Le peuple iranien attend du Parlement européen et de l'Union européenne de reconnaître le massacre de 1988 comme un génocide et un crime contre l'humanité. Je vous souhaite la santé et la réussite pour la nouvelle année. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Madam Toya. And now it would be our colleague Petri Sarvamaa, MEP from Finland, Vice Chair of the Committee on Budgetary Control, who will be taking the floor. Mr. Sarvamaa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Dear Mrs. Rajavi, dear friends of Free Iran colleagues, I am extremely pleased to see us all gathered after a long break, gathered together for this very, very important cause, to discuss the situation of human rights in Iran, despite the restrictions posed by the pandemic. This issue should really be a topic of absolute priority for everyone in Europe. There are many issues which we do focus on, but we always remember that the people of Iran, in sacrificing everything they have while being ruled by tyrants who suppress only to maintain power, despite the will of large segments of their population. Unfortunately, the nationwide and continuing uprising of the Iranian people in various provinces and in recent weeks in Isfahan draws less attention than, for example, the nuclear talks in Vienna, and despite the nuclear talks have ended without any results. It really has to be said that when a man who has apparently blood of 30,000 political prisoners of the MEK massacred in 1988 has this blood on his hands, becomes the president of the country, a president who has not been elected by the people, but appointed by a supreme leader, then it has to be that the world community reacts to this immediately. And the EU, the European Union, should have taken a position already and acted according to its global human rights sanction regime. But we did not see that, and this is very unfortunate. We are aware that the mullahs are deceptively trying to propagate the false idea that there is no alternative to the ruling system in Iran. But this should never be accepted as such. There is always a democratic choice if there is will. Therefore, we ask our officials in the European Union and leaders to side with the Iranian people and this viable alternative that the people of Iran have already. The European Parliament could actually play a key role in this regard. We must let the resistance units inside Iran know that we are with them. We appreciate their brave and courageous activities for which they put their lives at risk daily. The history will remember what they are doing for establishing freedom and democracy in their homeland, and we in the European Parliament admire them for that. Finally, I would also like to express my admiration for the Friends of Free Iran initiative announced by my dear colleague Mr. Zver and the efforts of Mr. Tsartsaleos as well. As one of the signatories of the statement on Iran, I personally fully agree that this Parliament should recognize the 1988 massacre as a genocide and crime against humanity. This is the least we can do for the families of the victims, and in this respect, I encourage all my colleagues in the European Parliament to join us. Dear Mrs. Rajavi, 2 years ago, you came to the European Parliament in Strasbourg to introduce the valuable book, the very sad book of the 1988 massacre. We want to thank you and respect you for your tireless efforts. And it is not only about your struggle, it is about our commitment to defend our common values. As you victoriously succeeded in the unimaginable delisting campaign, and as you made the historic transfer of the PMOI members out of Iraq to safety possible, you will as well one day have democracy and you will see freedom in Iran. And please know that you have my full support for this. I truly believe the day when the sun of freedom will shine over your country is coming soon, and we will be standing by you to celebrate that day. Thank you very much.
Dear Mr. Sarvama, thank you for your valuable remarks. On December 2020, European Union said it will react to crimes against humanity wherever it takes place. It is time to apply this law for the case of Raisi, who is one of the perpetrators of the 1988 massacre in Iran. I'm sure with your support, we can advance our cause. Thank you again, and I wish you health and success in the coming year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Petri, for your important remarks. And now the floor goes to Mr. Stanislav Polak.
Colleagues, distinguished guests, and dear Madam Rajavi, good afternoon from Prague, and many greetings also from my political movements, mayors and independents. We are just now in this time creating a new Czech government because we were successful in October's national elections. And also in Czech Republic, we have now a very bad situation with COVID-19, so I'm happy I can join your meeting now online. First of all, I would like to stress to our friends from National Council of Resistance, we are fully support you, and also especially Madam Rajavi. I attended your great gatherings in Paris several times, and I think anyone who had the chance to be at those gatherings knows very well how strong and how well supported your National Council is. And I think during the years that I have followed your campaigns, when you were able to remove the unjust blacklisting of NCRI that took maybe more than 10 or 15 years of tireless political and legal battles. But at the end, you won as you were right. Yeah. And so many members of your movements during the years were beaten to death or killed by rockets of forces linked with the Iranian regime. And I think you have come a very long way today when we see the world finally starting to wake up to threats of the Iranian regime, not only to its own citizens, but also to people of the region, and also the rest of the world. And it's our responsibility as members of European Parliament to ask or to wake up our European institutions and support your National Council of Resistance, because this Iranian regime cannot be our partner. We know this regime. We know who are members of this regime. We remember many massacres of this regime, a crime against humanity. So finally, I would like to stress I support you, Madam Rajavi, your political movement, and I fully support a free and democratic Iran. Thank you.
Dear Mr. Fulchak, thank you very much for your support for our resistance. I'm very happy to see you again. Thank you for the important issues that you pointed out. Your firm positions against the mullah's regime have always been encouraging to the people of Iran. I hope that we can soon bring the leaders of this criminal regime to justice. Thank you again, and I wish you health and success in 2022.
Thank you. And now the floor goes to Madame Isabel Benjumea, MEP from Spain.
Thank you, Chair. Dear Maryam Rajavi, dear friends of the National Councils of Resistance and friends of Iran, there's very little to add to everything that has been said, but I would like to recap a little bit what we said today. It's our duty as Democrats and belonging to this institution, to the European Parliament, to raise our voice, defending the human rights, defending the violations that the human rights are suffering in Iran, and giving voice to those who cannot raise it in Iran because of the dictatorship. It's a duty as Democrats to defend our values, not only for our countries, but for all of the countries around the world. And in that case, in that sense, we need to really support the protests that are taking place in Iran. And we need to condemn all the attacks that the protesters are suffering. Also, we need to remember, and that's why it's so important to remember the massacre of 1988. Which is a genocide and a crime against humanity. And we need to give voice to that and remember, constantly remember the huge violations to the human rights and to the people in Iran that are taking place right now. I would like to also say that there are many members here today, but there are many others in the European Parliament that support your cause. So we need to push. It's our duty to push inside the institution to have as many resolutions as possible, to put pressure over in the international community so that we can all collaborate and work together to at least have a clear message to the dictatorship in Iran. The message is that we are against the violations of the human rights, and that we will work together to make Iran to have what we have, a democracy and rights and duties for the citizens and freedom for all of them. So all my support to your cause. You have friends in the parliament, you can count on us, and we'll keep working to give voice to your cause inside this parliament, but also internationally. Thank you.
Dear Madam Benkhoume, thank you for your remarks and your support for the Iranian people. As you said, the Iranian people must be supported, and Europe must put pressure on the mullah's regime. I hope you success and health in the new year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Benkhoume. And now the floor goes to Mr. Masilis, MEP from Germany.
Yes, I'm representing Lithuania. Dear Mrs. Rajavi, dear friends of democratic Iran, it is very much understandable, especially for people of Lithuania, what happened in these bloody events of 1988, because it's the same period, the same strive for freedom, the same fight for democracy, which was successful that time for the Lithuanians. And of course, we are on your side in your permanent fight for things important for all the European Parliament and for every people of goodwill in all the world. So we support your courage, constantly maintaining opposition to the non-democratic regime, your strive for free elections, for plurality, for abolition of death penalty, and women's rights. So let us to express full support for your fight for freedom and democracy. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Mr. Majlis. Thank you very much for your remarks and your participation in this meeting. I hope we can see you, all of you, in Ashraf Tree.
Thank you, Mr. Masilis, MEP from Lithuania, for your remarks, and sorry for my mistake. And now, Mr. Gyuking, who is an MEP from Germany. You are from Germany, aren't you?
Yeah. Yes, I come from Germany.
I got it right there.
And my assistant, Christopher, translate. It's okay, my English is not good, and it's better when it's translate. Ja, okay. Ja, erst einmal ganz, ganz lieben Dank für die Einladung und ganz herzlichen Dank für Ihr Engagement.
First of all, thank you very much for this invitation and for organizing this event and for the words that expressed today.
Und seien Sie sicher, dass Europa durchaus Gespräche führt im Hintergrund, sie sind nur nicht sichtbar.
Absolutely, you should rest absolutely assured that Europe is in the background holding talks to improve this situation. Thank you.
Denn wir vertreten Werte wie Rechtsstaatlichkeit, Menschenwürde und Menschenrechte.
So we wish to propagate a message about human rights and about the support of people.
Und daher können wir so ein Regime wie in Iran nicht tolerieren.
And thereby, it's absolutely goes without saying that we cannot tolerate a regime such as Iran.
Wir müssen aber auch sehen, dass Iran aus eigener Kraft die Wende schaffen muss.
And also, we have to look at how Iran, as a one power, finds this way of change.
Wir können das begleiten, oder wir müssen das sogar begleiten als gute Europäer und auch unterstützen, keine Frage. Aber es muss aus dem Iran heraus, von innen herauskommen.
So it is It is our role, obviously, to support, to accompany, and to aid and facilitate this change within Iran. But this change must come from within Iran itself, and from the people, and it must emanate from the people within Iran.
Und der Iran hat es bereits schon mal vorgemacht in seiner Geschichte. Ich brauche Ihnen das nicht zu sagen. Am 16. Januar 1979 wurde eine 2500 Jahre andauernde Monarchie beendet und der Schah aus dem Land gejagt.
So I don't need to explain to you, obviously, that many of this power from within the country has happened, and you know that yourself. I mean, just taking one example is obviously looking at what happened on the 16th of January 1979, when a 2,500-old monarchy was simply ended like that. I mean, you're obviously aware of this.
Khomeini kam zurück im Februar 79. Die Massen jubelten ihm zu und es wurde der Gottesstaat ausgerufen.
So obviously February, that later came in the new regime from exile, and that sort of put into place this sort of theocratic state. Yes.
Heute ist der Iran an einem Punkt angelangt, wo man sagen kann, das hat nichts mit einem Gottesstaat zu tun.
But we are very much in the position where we can say that what happens in Iran today has nothing to do with God or religion.
Denn ich sage Ihnen, Gott allgemein, egal ob im Koran oder egal in der Bibel, Gott ist gütig, Gott ist gut, Gott ist tolerant und Gott besitzt Nächstenliebe.
And so, irrespective of which God or which faith one has, whether that comes or derives from the Bible or whether that comes from the Quran, those that have a faith will always be able to say that actually God is good, God is loving, God is tolerant of people.
Und all das wird in Iran nicht praktiziert. Es sind Verbrecher am Werke, wir sprechen es ruhig aus, die nur dem Machterhalt dienen und dem Volk schaden.
And obviously what is practiced in Iran is completely the opposite. So you see, violence against people and against human rights, and that is obviously not coherent with that religious message.
Und wir sehen, meine ich zumindest, dass wir die Zeichen eines Umbruchs deutlich erkennen können, in denen die Menschen immer mehr aufbegehren und auch ersten Demonstrationen in Teheran sich wagen.
And obviously it's therefore our duty to sort of give greater emphasis to those that are demonstrating in Tehran, those that are taking voice and are taking up action.
Und aus dieser zarten Pflanze der Demokratieversuche durch Demonstration müssen wir eine Bewegung schaffen, die dieses Verbrecherregime davonfegt. Und da ist es unsere Aufgabe, begleitend zu unterstützen, nicht nur verbal, sondern auch über moderne Medien und Kommunikation. Keine Frage. Und seien Sie sich sicher, wir stehen an Ihrer Seite, denn wir stehen für Rechtsstaatlichkeit und Menschlichkeit.
Yes, so obviously we've got to sort of look at how we can create a way, a means forward of enabling this situation, of enabling a freer regime. Obviously, we are there to support, to help, to ensure that this can happen from the Iranian people. We can do that with the greater use of modern media, absolutely. But I want you to know today that we stand with you, that we are ready, and that we support you and on your side 100%. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goking. I think you are the true representatives of Europe because you defend the values of human rights and democracy to establish a republic in a free Iran. The Iranian people demand the prosecution of the Mullah's regime's leader in an international court. Thank you again and wish you health and success in 2022.
Thank you. We still have some time for anyone wishing to take the floor, just for a couple of minutes, and then we will have the closing remarks and the conclusion of this event. If there is anyone wishing to take the floor, I invite him or her to do so at this moment. If not, I would invite again Mrs. Maryam Rajavi to give us her closing remarks after this meeting.
Dear Mr. Zarzalejos, I thank you very much for your leadership and moderating this meeting. These meetings are all part of the struggle to defend the human rights and freedom of the people of Iran. The people of Iran will never forget men and women who supported their cause for freedom. All the speakers pointed out very important aspects of the situation of Iran. I'm sure that together we will continue to restore freedom and democracy in Iran that will promote peace and security in the world and in the region. I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Rajavi. I think that we have had a very important exchange of views with members from all the most relevant political groups in Parliament. And there have been two important things that I would highlight in our discussions today. The first one is that we have reasserted our commitment to freedom in Iran. And I would say that we do this not only for the sake of the freedom of Iran, the Iranian people, but also because, as representative of European peoples, we are obliged to be loyal to the values and principles that we hold. So it's not only for you, it's also for us that we are committed to this cause of freedom in Iran. The second important point is that the support to make a real progress towards the European Parliament officially declare the massacre of 1988 as an act of genocide. And that will be very, very important. And I think that we will be able to gather all the necessary support to take the final steps in this process. I have to say that this might be an inconvenient truth, because someone as Raisi, who is one of the responsible, has to be held responsible of the massacre, now leads Iran, and we are again engaging in a new round of nuclear talks with this country. But while diplomacy has its own paths, it is for the European Parliament in this case to expose that situation that is part of the memory of the Iranian people, that it's also a right of all the victims that were murdered to be remembered, and also it's imperative for the justice to have a final clearance of what has happened there and bring those responsible to justice. Also, it's important to follow the proceedings in several European countries that are starting to open the way for end with this feeling of impunity on those responsible of crimes, some of them very serious and committed on European soil. We have made an important progress of that, and we will be we will be closely monitoring any progress in this issue. So I thank you, Madam Rajavi, for attending. I thank you for your remarks, for your inspiration, and for the continuing leadership that you are providing this enormous effort for the good of your people, an effort that we share. And I would like to thank all those who have been absolutely necessary to put this event together, and that help us to continue with our commitment to a free Iran. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Engelbart.
Now let me tell you that according to the sequence of this event, while we finish the physical presence part of the event now, the discussion can continue under the chair of Alejo Vidal Quadras on online mode. So this event is not entirely finished in that sense. Okay, thank you. Have a good evening.
All right, so we go on. Dear friends, good afternoon to you all. It's a great pleasure for me to share with you this exchange of views on the week of celebration of the Day of Human Rights. I want to congratulate my good friends Javier Zarzalejos and Milan Zver, co-chairs of the informal intergroup Friends of Free Iran in the European Parliament, for having hosted the first part of this timely and necessary event. Timely because after the repeated protest by the people of Iran for the abuses of the mullahs regime that have taken the streets of many Iranian cities along the last 3 years, hundreds of innocent victims have been shot dead, thousands of political prisoners populate the prisons of this evil dictatorship, and we all know that being arrested by the Revolutionary Guards or by the Massacre militia implies torture or an even worse fate in the hands of these butchers. I said it's timely and it's also necessary. Necessary because we must multiply our pressure on the European External Action Service, on the High Representative for Common Security Policy, and on national governments of EU member states to change their strategy in relation to the Iranian totalitarian theocracy. For decades, appeasement, dialogue, and negotiations have come to no result. The Iranian clerics have never ceased their promotion of terrorist actions in the Middle East and beyond, their proxy wars, their systematic violations of human rights inside Iran, and their repeated non-compliance with the terms of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action they signed together with the United States, with the European Union, Russia, China, UK, and Germany, committing themselves to stop their nuclear weapons program. They have never been neither accepted to be accountable for the 1988 massacre of 30,000 members of the PMOI was decided unlawfully by Khomeini in one of the worst crimes against humanity since the end of the Second World War. In spite of this uninterrupted rogue behavior, stepping on all principles of humanitarianism and international law, the successive high representatives of the European Common Security Policy and the European national governments have insisted on their weak, immoral, useless, and coward approach to deal with one of the most cruel and aggressive tyrannies of the world. Which can be the reasons for such a mistaken policy? fear of the capacity of the Iranian regime to organize terrorist attack against Western targets. They have kept doing so. And the failed bomb attack against the annual Great Gathering of the Iranian resistance in 2018 in Villepinte, in the surroundings of Paris, where hundreds of European and American dignitaries were present, is the most recent evidence of that. Perhaps the hope that soft power will work in this case. All evidence proves it does not. Is perhaps the economic interest of some big European companies to have access to the Iranian market of 80 million people? No serious or reliable business can be made with a regime rotting corruption, a financial system on the verge of collapse, and an impoverished population that struggles to survive. So there is a mystery behind this counterproductive policy that perhaps one day will be revealed to cover those responsible with everlasting shame. In the meanwhile, we must persist in our fight for freedom, democracy, and human rights in Iran, both in the European Parliament, thanks to the excellent work of Friends of Free Iran, and in the European institutions in general, as well as in the media, in the national parliaments and governments, by the restless action of the non-profit organization In Search of Justice International Committee, where I have the privilege to work hand in hand with my dear friends Struan Stevenson, Giulio Terzi, and Paolo Casaca. I dare say, with the required modesty, that we four have become a real pain in the neck of Khamenei, Raisi, and the rest of the gang. Many thanks again for your participation in this event. And now we open the second part of it. It's a great pleasure, of course, and an honor to have the president of the NCRI, Maryam Rajavi, with us also in the second part of this event. Good afternoon, Mrs. President.
Thank you very much, dear Mr. Vidal Quadras. I'm really very happy to see you sound and healthy. Several years ago, as a vice president of the European Parliament, you played a key role for the right of the Iranian people, the Iranian resistance, and the Ashrafis. This is something that they will never forget. Ashrafis want to see you very soon in Ashraf 3. You are a member of the family of the Iranian resistance and a brother for all of us. Your support during all these years had a great impact on our movement, and I thank you very much for all your efforts. I wish you and your family health and success in the coming year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. President. You know that Stu and Giulio, Paolo, and myself, we consider ourselves as Rafis of honor. And of course, were it not because of the COVID, we would visit you in Ashraf very often. But unfortunately, in the present circumstances, we cannot. But as soon as the situation becomes normal again, have no doubt that we will be regular visitors to Ashraf 3. Thank you, Mrs. President.
Thank you. All Ashrafis are waiting you, and they are waiting to see you as soon as possible.
Yes, because when we go to Ashraf 3, not only we fight for the best cause, but we have an extraordinarily good time with our friends. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mrs. President. And now we go on with the meeting. And first of all, I will give the floor to our friend Petras Auštrevičius, a member of the European Parliament from Lithuania. Petras, are you with us? No? Okay.
Rajavi, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, greetings on this very important occasion. I'm really proud to be a part of the global campaign for justice and the international efforts to hold to account regimes, leaders, and officials responsible for the 1988 massacre of 30,000 political prisoners in Iran. What happened in prisons across Iran in 1988 was a crime against humanity and a genocide, according to several prominent jurists and human rights lawyers, like Jeffrey Robertson QC and Professor Eric David. And we know from testimonies of so many survivors in the trial in Sweden, which are also verified by United Nations and Amnesty reports, that the current president in Iran, Ebrahim Raisi, personally was involved in these systematic and extrajudicial killings. In recent years, there has been important progress as more human rights experts, organizations, and parliamentarians, including the United Nations Special Rapporteur for Iran, support and add their voice to this demand for justice and accountability to end impunity for human rights abusers in Iran. We expect and urge High Representative Mr. Borrell to recognize the 1988 massacre as a genocide and to ask the United Nations and High Commissioner for Human Rights to immediately launch an investigation into 1988 massacre in Iran, with the aim of bringing the perpetrators to justice and an international tribunal. Today, the people of Iran and their organized pro-democracy resistance led by Mrs. Maryam Rajavi are making great progress globally with regards to holding the regime accountable and to challenging its repressions through popular protest despite severe crackdowns. The United Nations, the European Union, and all organizations have to do utmost in order to bring perpetrators to justice. The European Union must stand on their side instead of standing in their way. Thank you very much, and I wish you a very good conference.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Petras. And now I give the floor to our good friend member of the European Parliament from Italy, Raffaele Fitto.
Innanzitutto vorrei ringraziare i rappresentanti di Friends of Free Iran per l'invito all'incontro di oggi, così come tutti i colleghi che prenderanno parte. Anche se non sono fisicamente con voi, ho voluto esserci con un messaggio per riaffermare il mio impegno e quello del gruppo dei conservatori riformisti per creare le condizioni per un Iran diverso da quello che è oggi, ossia una Repubblica democratica,
we want all a different Iran from what we have today, which does not have nuclear weapons.
Ma soprattutto dal punto di vista simbolico, visto che nei prossimi giorni verranno celebrate
Today's
la giornata dei
meeting
diritti
is
umani
not
e la
only
giornata della
important
prevenzione del genocidio.
for its
Due
own
giornate che a mio avviso
reasons,
hanno una
but
valenza
also
fondamentale per l'Iran,
because we have the human rights in front of us. This is important. The Iranian regime, with the violations of human rights, continuous violation of human rights is going on. We saw on the 26th of November how the Iranian regime mercenaries were firing at peaceful protesters in the city of Isfahan, and it proved how brutal the regime is. So the regime is only fighting for itself, for its own survival in this important historical moment. Therefore, this is an important moment for the history. The world community must have a correct policy, and it's important that we have cooperation and solidarity on both sides of the Atlantic, and to have a common policy about human rights and about the nuclear program of the regime. This on one side. On the one hand, we have to impose sanctions, but also we have to prevent the regime not to use these negotiations to advance its nuclear program. So this is unacceptable for us. I'm sure that with this program, and we will have initiatives that will support the Iranian people, such as Mrs. Rajavi and others who are helping every day for a free and democratic. I hope that in near future you could have a country which could have cooperation with all counterparts peacefully. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Excuse me, I said that I'm giving the floor now to Isabella Tovaglieri, member of the European Parliament from Italy. You have the floor.
Cara Presidente, cari colleghi, la bollente situazione dell'Iran è al culmine e i nodi vengono al pettine.
Dear colleagues, the volatile situation in Iran and the ongoing situation every day, the regime that has tried to take all the rights of Iranian people, they have come to the streets, the people. Recent days, we have seen protests for the issue of water. In Isfahan, more than half of Iran's population live under the poverty line. The regime has neither the will nor want to support or help these people. The inflation rate is skyrocketing, and in this situation, women in Iran are suffering even more. They are always the first victims. Many brave women, because of refusing to accept this regime, are in jail. In every protest, we see that women are in the forefront. They are the ones who are leading the protests. And this in the Iranian resistance movement is also evident, which is being led by a Muslim democratic woman such as Mrs. Maryam Rajavi. Women have different important roles in the resistance movement, and this is giving us a lot of hope for a free and democratic Iran. And I, as a representative of the Italian people, and as a European, I feel very much close to the women in Iran and their fight for freedom and democracy. The democratic countries, especially in the European Union, should play the role, and we have to remember that Iran is a country in the political chess which makes the stability of the region depending on it. Therefore, fighting against fundamentalist regime is also our fight, and is also our duty morally and democratically to support them. Thank you.
And now we give the floor to Frank Vokovic, a member of the European Parliament from Slovenia. Frank, you have the floor.
Dear Ms. Rajavi, like many colleagues, I have been supporting the Iranian resistance and its president-elect, Ms. Maryam Rajavi, because she has a democratic platform for future Iran. As a supporter of the cause of human rights and democracy in Iran, I believe that the European Union must stand with the people of Iran who are rejecting the regime and its president, Ebrahim Raisi. The world knows Raisi is a mass murderer and not a representative of Iranian people. He must be prosecuted for executing tens of thousands of opposition members from the PMOI and other Iranian activists during the last 33 years who said no to mullahs and demanded freedom and democracy. The ongoing protests by farmers in Isfahan and other cities across Iran, with people chanting "Death to dictator," show people of Iran want change, and the Iranian resistance and its resistance unit inside Iran are helping the people to achieve that. They deserve our support, and the EU must back them. I also join my colleagues to call on the EU and the Council and not appease the regime in Iran by giving it sanction relief, but instead put new sanction against Raisi for massacre of political prisoners and to designate the entire IRGC as a terrorist organization because they are killing protesters on the streets of Iran. I also call on Mr. Borrell to speak up and demand a United Nations investigation into the 1988 massacre to investigate and prosecute Raisi. I will continue to support the people of Iran, the resistance led by Ms. Rajavi, until the day Iran is free and regime leaders brought to the justice in international courts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank, for your very right words. Let's hope that Josep Borrell will listen to you. Now, I leave the floor to another member of parliament from Italy, Anna Bonfrisco. Anna, you have the floor.
Carissime amiche e amici per un Iran libero. La giornata internazionale per la commemorazione e prevenzione del genocidio e la giornata
internazionale Day to follow human rights and the genocide is very important because 70 years ago we accepted the responsibility to prevent other genocides. So it means that we have to stay together to support the dignity of human beings. Despite that, the international organization and democratic institutions have been disappointing in regard to what's happening in Iran. The people of Iran have the worst human rights, the human rights which is committed by the regime that is led by Raisi, which should be remembered, he is in the blacklist of the sanctions of the United States. And Raisi has had a role in 1988 massacre when he was part of the death committee, and he was responsible for killing of thousands of opposition members. So therefore, I protested or asked a question about the European Union for the participation of Enrique Mora in the and I got more doubtful about the relations with Iran. Just for the first half of the year, the regime is accepting responsibility for execution of 112 people from different parts of Iran. We have to remember that the policy of carrot and stick has been useless because the regime is doing the opposite. And the commitment for a free Iran and end genocide is not just a moral duty, it's an obligation. So we should ask ourselves that the regime in Iran, through its allies, has been taking part in destabilizing the region, such as Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen. Why? Why are they interfering in different countries? Why do they continue their nuclear program? Why have they created this nuclear program at all? And why is this nuclear program clearly including military aspects such as nuclear warheads and guns and so on? So the racist government knows that it is facing an ignorance from the world because it wants to remove Israel from the world map, and it's denying Holocaust. So there are many questions to be asked, but in front of we have only one answer: the generation of human life by them.
Thank you very much. And now we move to Czech Republic, and we give the floor to Veronika Veksinova. Veronika, you have the floor.
Which takes place on the occasion of International Human Rights Day and aims to highlight the situation in a country where human rights are being seriously violated. Today, in the West, many people consider right to cheap housing or the right to connect to the internet as essential human rights. But in Iran, people are fighting for the right to freedom, for the right to express their opinion, for the right to life. Thousands of people are being executed in Iran, including women, for having a different view of developments in their country. After the election in which Ebrahim Raisi became the new president, the situation worsened. It is our duty to point out these atrocities, which I would not be afraid to call the genocide of opposition. I am glad that Mrs. Rajavi is fighting for the rights of these people who want freedom, and I am honored to be able to support her, at least verbally.
Thank you very much, Veronika. We stay in Czech Republic, and it is a pleasure to give the floor to Radba Maxova.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to join you today as we declare our commitment to defend human rights in Iran. All people are born free and equal in dignity and rights, and I am honored to be able to support via the Friends of Free Iran group in the European Parliament people of Iran who have been oppressed for too long and who were stripped to their basic rights. I find particularly concerning the situation of Iranian women who are seen as second-class citizens and whose rights to sexual and reproductive health were recently yet again violated by the new legislation. The deterioration of human rights in Iran continues, and we must all do our best to end this. Human rights should always come first. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Radka. And now it's time for the In Search of Justice International Committee. And I give the floor, first of all, to my dear friend and colleague and comrade in the fight for freedom and democracy in Iran, former Foreign Minister of Italy, Giulio Terzi.
Mr. Chairman, dear Leo, it's indeed a great honor to be here, although from remote, and to express my really deepest respect and admiration to Madam Maryam Rajavi, President of NCRI, and the honorable members of the European Parliament colleagues who are attending this important session. In a speech last October, former Vice President of the United States made an important remark that I would like to quote and to remind again, and I quote, "One of the biggest lies the ruling regime has sold to the world is that there is no alternative to the status quo in Iran. But there is an alternative, well, fully prepared, perfectly qualified and popularly supported, an alternative called the MEC." End of quote. We are here today to express our full trust that the only viable alternative to the current rogue regime is represented by this movement led by an extraordinary and inspiring woman, the President-elect Madame Maryam Rajavi. And the presence of so numerous members of the European Parliament who signed the statement for today's meeting is a further proof that the MEC and the 10-point plan drawn by Madame Rajavi do represent, indeed, the perfect path to ensure freedom for every Iranian, in Iran and abroad, and to finally make of Iran a country committed to democracy, human rights, and freedom. A country in which all the diversities are guaranteed and respected, a non-nuclear country with acceptable working conditions and full respect of the environment. With today's debate, we hopefully are molding and encouraging the foundation for a necessary roadmap in order to define concrete measures for sending finally to justice and prosecute the regime's leadership responsible for the 1988 genocide of 30,000 political prisoners, starting with President Raisi. Now it is the time for an urgent call to the European Union to demonstrate the true commitment to its own principles enshrined in Article 21 of the Treaty on the European Union. And it is noteworthy here to recall again, once again, it was recalled over the last few weeks and months, to recall again the words of Prime Minister of Slovenia, Janša, addressing the summit this year, Free Iran World Summit 2021. And I quote, "For nearly 33 years, the world had forgotten about the victims of the massacre. But this should change. A United Nations Commission of Inquiry is of crucial importance to shed light on the horrible 1988 massacres. Families of the victims seek a commission of inquiry so that they could finally obtain justice." I would also remind what Amnesty International Secretary General Agnes Callamard said on June 19th, and I quote again, that Ebrahim Raisi has risen to the presidency instead of being investigated for the crimes against humanity and murder, and forced disappearance and torture, is a grim reminder that impunity reigns supreme in Iran. We continue to call for Ebrahim Raisi to be investigated for his involvement in past and ongoing crimes under international law, including by states that exercise universal jurisdiction. That was said by Amnesty. And let me note also that the highest level of the UN, there has been a widespread concern for massive human rights violations and crimes against humanity perpetrated by the regime. Many have spoken up, such as the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Iran, UN Working Group on Enforced or Involuntary Disappearances, the UN Secretary General. And among UN member states, the landmark trial in Sweden of Ahmed Nouri accused of mass execution of political prisoners, is a pivotal moment for victims long denied recognition and justice. Let me recall also the Swiss Federal Criminal Court decision to investigate the murder of Dr. Maryam Rajavi as part of a genocide and a crime against humanity. There is no more room for excuses. The EU officials, also pursuant the Magnitsky Act, the European Magnitsky Act, have a legal obligation to condemn and not to condone the violations on human rights in Iran. Last but not least, I believe this important conference and other initiatives and measures which we expect to follow should be considered by the honorable members of the European Parliament. They should consider also what is going on the level of disinformation and defamation against MEC PMOI organization and against their supporters. This is an horrible disinformation campaign which has been carried on by the Iranian government and its proxies. Its proxies also among media in Europe, Italian media, and supporters of Iran. We are all informed about the repeated attempts by the regime and its accomplices to discredit the organization of the resistance. They're doing so spreading around, and that is another heinous crime which should be properly prosecuted. They are spreading around completely false and slanderous stories. And let me say that, like other friends in this group, in the group in search of justice and other human rights defenders on the Iranian situation, like other friends in this group, I'm not only a witness of what I'm seeing happening, but I had recently also to ban and report to the authorities some users of social media who did send to me that cheap propaganda with an obvious threatening intent. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you.
Dear Mr. Terzi, thank you for your remarks and your support for the Iranian people. You had a very important role in the justice movement for the victims of the 1988 massacre and for exposing regime's crimes in November 2019 uprising. As you know, it was the Iranian people's independent determination and love for freedom that led to the uprising in November 2019. The regime killed more than 1,500 youth and teenagers, and now their mothers are seeking justice for them. This crime against humanity must be firmly condemned. Silence and inaction give the regime a green light to continue and step up its crimes against humanity. Thank you again for all your effort and for standing with the people of Iran, and wish you all the best in the coming year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. And I said that now it's time to take the floor for a very, very good friend of long date of fight against the criminal regime of the Ayatollahs, Stuart Stevenson, who is the intellectual heavy artillery of the In Search of Justice International Committee. Stuart, you have the floor.
Unmute. Thank you very much, Aleko. And it's great that we also have Mrs. Rajavi present with us today, albeit on Zoom. Of course, I'm very pleased to be able to join this important event today, and I'm very pleased, Aleko, regarding your opening remarks, to be a member of such a distinguished group of pains in the neck as the In Search of Justice, the Four Cavaliers. And it's great that we are all here at this event today. I spent the first 4 years as an MEP, together with Paolo Casacco, co-chairing the Friends of a Free Iran. And after Paolo left the parliament, I went on to chair the intergroup FOFI for another 10 years. So it's really terrific to know that it remains a powerful voice for freedom, justice, and democracy for that long-suffering nation. The theocratic regime has a team in Vienna this week, again trying to hoodwink the Americans into rejoining the defunct JCPOA nuclear deal. Under the directions of the elderly and demented Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and their new criminal president, Ebrahim Raisi, the so-called butcher of Tehran, they've tabled demands that are impossible for the Biden administration to meet. They want the immediate lifting of all sanctions, including even those that were directed at the regime's proxy wars in the Middle East, which is something Biden politically cannot entertain. They also want a guarantee that no future US administration would ever again withdraw from the deal. Again, a guarantee that no president would be able to give. Meanwhile, the mullahs have accelerated their program of enriching uranium, now at 60% purity, which is only a step away from weapons grade, because their clear objective, interference from the telephone, my apologies. Their clear objective is to build a nuclear bomb, and their pretext of negotiations in Vienna were only ever a masquerade to hide that reality from the West. So the JCPOA is dead in the water, and Joseph Borrell would be well advised to abandon his policy of appeasement of this repressive regime and turn his attention instead to providing EU support for the Iranian people who long for freedom and who long for an end to violent repression. Khamenei thought that by engineering the election of Ebrahim Raisi as president, he would confront the West with a hardline aggressor who would frighten his enemies into submission. Well, his plans have backfired spectacularly. Here we go again, sorry. I'll have to unplug this. My apologies. Raisi is a murderer and perpetrator of genocide who has openly boasted of his role as a member of the Death Commission, which oversaw the massacre of more than 30,000 political prisoners in the summer of 1988. And most of those executed, including many teenagers and even pregnant women, were supporters of the MEK. As we've heard today, he ordered the massacre of over 1,500 unarmed prisoners during the nationwide uprising in Iran in November 2019. He has directed innumerable hangings since he took over the judiciary, including many this year. And according to some eyewitness survivors, Raisi often supervised the torture of men and women and then personally attended their execution. So now we know that Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, Agnes Callamard, the Secretary General of Amnesty, have called for Raisi to be investigated for crimes against humanity and for his involvement in murder and forced disappearance and torture. So it's essential for the EU to set out a clear roadmap for the indictment of Raisi and his henchmen for these crimes. There must be no impunity. Having agreed to a system similar to the US Magnitsky Act, the EU now has the power to punish individuals involved in human rights violations and genocide and to ban them from entering the bloc. Surely it's a sacred principle for the EU to condemn the crime of genocide and therefore to endorse a UN call for accountability over the 1988 massacre in Iran and the ongoing violations of human rights in that country. But like Giulio Terzi, please let me sound a warning to my distinguished colleagues who are members of the European Parliament, because I know from bitter experience that any time we make progress against this evil regime, they retaliate. Their Ministry of Intelligence and Security, MIS, mobilizes its disinformation, its demonization machinery to discredit Iran's democratic alternative, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, and of course its pivotal organization, the MEK. While I was an MEP, the MOIS had trained agents coming into the European Parliament to brief MEPs and to infiltrate Iranian opposition rallies and meetings. They have a list of compliant journalists ready to unleash their propaganda in the Western media. They have even sent, as we heard today, their registered diplomats to try to bomb and kill us in peaceful opposition rallies on European soil. So please be on your guard. This is a dangerous and ruthless regime who will stop at nothing to silence their opponents. We will win by silencing them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stevenson. I thank you for being with us today. Your firmness and your strong speeches and your firm positions against the mullahs regime have always encouraged the Iranian people and the Iranian resistance. Particularly your campaign against Raisi for his presence in your country for the conference of Glasgow was very effective. We never forget your support during hard times at Ashraf 1 and Ashraf 2, it means liberty. Your brothers and sisters at Ashraf 3 are waiting to see you again. And as you said, you are in the wanted list of Mullah's regime. And it is an honor for you because Mullah's regime fear you and your colleagues, Mr. Vidal Quadras, Mr. Kazaka, Mr. Terzi, but they cannot go on. The Iranian resistance with your support and with you, I'm sure that will be succeed and Iran will be free. God bless you and wish you the best in 2022.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Rajavi. That's very true that the mullahs fear us. And since they know we have a very powerful Scottish regiment among us, they still fear us. So now it's time for a very, very good friend, Paulo Casaca. Paulo is the most veteran of all us four in the fight against the criminals of the Iranian regime. When I came to the European Parliament 21 years ago, you know who introduced me cause of Iranian freedom and democracy and recruited me for this noble cause, Paulo Casaca. Paulo Casaca was my recruiter. And immediately I listened to him, and he was so convincing and such a good friend that I joined the cause, and since then I am fighting with him and Stuart and Julio in this endeavor that as far as we have life, we will go on with it. Paulo, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Alejo, for these very warm words. It has been really 2 decades of a great struggle together, sometimes hardship, but always the deep belief that we know we are doing the right thing, that struggling for our beloved friends of Iran, for their freedom, for their rights, is to struggle for peace in the whole world and for our own interests of democracy and freedom all over Europe and the world. Dear President Rajavi, it was a great pleasure to have had the opportunity of listening to you. And Julio Struan, thank you very much for your contributions. I would like to say that what makes me more happy is to see Javier Sarsalejos and Milan Sver to continue our work. That is a work that can never terminate unless we will see these criminals, the genocide team that is still ruling Iran, on a court, on an international court, answering for their crimes, because there is no alternative to this. We are now 73 years after the approval of the first human rights treaty, the International Human Rights Treaty, that is known as the Genocide Convention, exactly because it gave a big emphasis to the issue of genocide. The 9th of December was chosen to be celebrated since 2015 as the International Day of Commemoration and Dignity of the Victims of the Crime of Genocide and the Prevention of this crime. And so these dates cannot go without us reminding exactly what Javier Sarsalejos said in the beginning of this meeting. It is a duty, it's not an option, it is a duty of all the international community to pursue those who are responsible for genocide. This duty can never be put away. And for those who have, as always in the past, nurtured these appeasement ideas that, well, we have something more important. We have the nuclear deal and we will convince the mullahs to be peaceful. We will convince the mullahs to forget about the atomic bomb. And so, for having negotiations, well, we cannot say that they are genocides, that Mr. Raisi is one of the main culprits of the crimes. He has done nothing in his own professional life, nothing else than being a butcher. He has been a professional butcher for over 40 years. He is personally involved in the genocide. And all these circles of the nuclear negotiations have this only meaning. The Iranian genocide responsibles want the international community to give them some legitimacy. Because when we are dealing with them, and this American administration is going almost a year with enrolling and going and dreaming of whatever could be happening with this agreement. Well, they are not persecuting Raisi for his crimes. And this is the problem. In the name of peace, they are actually promoting war, because the impunity of the crime of the genocide means that the perpetrators of this crime continue to do it on a daily basis. They do it all the time again, and they are persecuting and murdering the people in Isfahan right now, as they have been doing time and time again. And this will only end when the international community will be serious, telling them, no, it has to stop. You have to come to an international court answering for your crimes. And this is my appeal. I would say nothing else but to join my voice to all of you, to all of the parliamentarians, and to this magnificent team here, and most in particular to all the Ashrafis, all the Iranian people, and their leader, Maryam Rajavi, who is an exceptional person that I think you are blessed to have in presiding the destinies of your resistance. And may we celebrate the day as soon as possible that these criminals will come to court and the Iranian people will be free. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kazako. I appreciate your strong message and effective activities in support of the Iranian resistance, and particularly during the campaign for Ashraf. You were the founder of the Friends of a Free Iran Committee in the European Parliament, as Mr. Vidal said now, and we never forget your efforts during difficult times. The passage of time has proven that your positions were correct, with icons like you and Mr. Vidal Quadras and Mr. Stevenson, who always stood with the oppressed people of Iran. I'm sure the Iranian people will understand who are the true representatives of Europe and democratic values. I'm sure that you will continue. Always I said that you were the pioneer of a just policy vis-à-vis the Mullah's regime and on favor of the right of people of Iran and the right of Iranian resistance. And as you know, you are the pioneer of a struggle against the Mullah's campaign against the demonizing the Iranian resistance. And you revealed always the agents of Mullah's regime, and it is very valuable for the Iranian movement, for the Iranian resistance, and for the Iranian people. Once again, thank you very much, and wish you health and success in the coming year, and hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. President. And thank you, Paolo, for your very inspired and strong words. There is something we will have to discuss among us, Giulio, Stu, and Paolo, myself. And as we are, according to Stu and the Four Musketeers, we must decide who is Porthos, who is Aramis, who is Athos, and who is D'Artagnan, you know. But of course, the youngest must be D'Artagnan, all right? And the rest of roles we can discuss among us and distribute them. Well, it's true that the fight has been very long and sometimes very hard. And we have had moments of joy, and we have had moments of pain. but we are here with the same determination, the same energy that we have always had, Mrs. President. So you can count on us as always. The event today has been, I think, extremely useful, because it has made clear that the European Parliament as an institution, and many MEPs have spoken today of different political groups, of different countries. It is clear that the European Parliament supports the Iranian democratic opposition. The European Parliament wants a change in the EU policy in relation to Iran, wants a stronger, more determined and more realistic policy, and put an end to this appeasement, to this weakness, to these negotiations that have no result, come to no result, and the only thing they do is to embolden the regime. I don't want to finish without a special mention of the women in Iran. As you all know, the ill treatment of women by the regime is really atrocious. And nowadays we see with horror the situation of women in Afghanistan. And there is a lot of concern and a lot of attention of the media about the women in Afghanistan. And it's right to do so, because it's really dramatic what the women in Afghanistan are going through since the Taliban went back to power. But what about the women in Iran? The women in Iran also suffer repression, oppression. They are considered citizens of second rank, and they are limited in their capacity to develop their individual lives, and they suffer all kinds of violations of their rights. And the democratic opposition we support is led by a woman. And women in this organization have very, very crucial responsibilities at all levels. So it's good that Europe is worried about women in Afghanistan, but it's time also to think as a priority in women in Iran, and to support this incredible woman that leads the Iranian resistance, and it's the best hope for a democratic change one day in Iran. So thank you to you all, and my best wishes. Thank you.
Once again, thank you very much, Mr. Vidal-Quadras. At the end, allow me to thank all our friends who participated in today's conference. Today is the anniversary of Students' Day in Iran. In this day, in 1953, pioneer students of Tehran University stood up against the regime of Shah, and 3 of them were killed by Shah's repressive forces. Despite all suppression, the Iranian people continue their struggle against 2 dictatorships. Therefore, your support is very important, and all your speeches in today's meeting were very strong and effective. Hope you health, especially with the current health crisis in the world. Thank you very much for your remarks and your participation in this meeting. God bless you, and I wish you all the best for the 2022. We are waiting you, and all the Ashrafis are waiting to see you as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.